The laughter in row 12 stopped cold when the first shudder ran through the cabin. A sound low, metallic, predatory rose beneath the steady hum of engines. It wasn't turbulence, it wasn't mechanical. Every veteran on board knew that sound, fighter jets. And yet, the woman in seat 14D didn't flinch. Colonel Alexandra Moreno had boarded Northwestern Flight 227 without fanfare. No announcements, no entourage. Just another middle-aged traveler with a boarding pass stamped 14D. The middle seat by the wing, the kind of seat most passengers dreaded. But one she accepted without complaint, as if she'd grown used to discomfort. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching this story from. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next mission that honors quiet heroes like Colonel Moreno. Her carry-on was a weathered canvas bag, frayed at the edges, its zipper patched with duct tape. Inside rested fragments of a career few would ever know, a faded squadron patch from her F-16 test wing, a flight log smudged with grease, a journal filled with coordinates from missions never spoken of in public. She slid the bag beneath the seat and smoothed her jacket. With quiet habit, she unfolded the safety card, one she could recite from memory, yet studied again with the discipline of someone who had built her life on procedures. Around her, passengers tapped on laptops, scrolled playlists, traded jokes. To them, she was invisible. Another anonymous face in the blur of travel. To her, they were background noise. Her gaze stayed fixed on the oval window, reading the horizon like a map she'd traced 1,000 times before. Then came the glint sunlight flickering sharp against glass. Brief, but unmistakable. She closed her eyes, hearing it now, the growl beneath the engines, distant but rising. A sound burned into her bones long ago. This flight would not remain ordinary for long. 40 minutes later, the airliner leveled into cruise, engines droning steady as the cabin settled. Conversations softened, books opened. A few passengers dozed. Then the captain's voice broke through, calm but edged with something else. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look out the left side of the aircraft, you're about to see something unusual today. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Seatbelts creaked as passengers leaned toward the windows. Out of the horizon, 3 silhouettes climbed fast, closing the distance with predatory grace. At first, just specks against the blue. Then sharp lines cut clear F-16C Vipers, banking hard before sliding into perfect formation. One rolled to knife edge, wings nearly vertical, before leveling with the airliner's left side. The other 2 locked into position behind, every movement exact, deliberate. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Phones lifted, cameras clicked. A businessman whispered, "That's military." A teenager muttered, "What are they doing here?" The lead fighter dipped a wing in salute, not for show, for meaning. Passengers traded looks, voices hushed. This wasn't routine, not weather, not training airspace. This was deliberate. These jets weren't crossing paths they were escorting. Every eye in the cabin searched for answers. Who on board warranted 3 fighter jets flying in tight formation beside a commuter plane bound for Anchorage? The lead flight attendant moved quietly down the aisle, her expression measured. She stopped at row 14, glanced at the woman in the middle seat. For the briefest moment, their eyes met. No words, just a nod, an acknowledgement. Lex didn't turn to the window. She didn't need to. She knew the language of steel wings and formation flying. She had spoken it for nearly 3 decades. Around her, the questions swelled in whispers. Who is she? Why here? Why now? Phones filmed, voices murmured, children pointed at the jets slicing the sky in unison. But in seat 14D, Colonel Moreno remained still, hands resting lightly on the canvas bag at her feet. The fighters outside held steady, their presence transforming a routine flight into a living tribute. No one knew it yet, but every passenger on board was about to carry this memory for the rest of their lives. Outside the windows, The three F-16 Vipers held their line with the kind of precision carved only by years of combat training. Their presence transformed an ordinary commuter flight into something ceremonial. A moment that carried weight without explanation. If you believe honor can appear when least expected, type homebound in the comments below and share this story with someone who deserves recognition. The whispers began softly, first in the back rows, then spreading forward like a ripple across water. Passengers leaned toward one another, voices lowered, curiosity sharpening into awe. The unspoken question threaded through the cabin, "Who is she?" Eyes searched the rows for a clue, a figure who matched the idea of importance. A general in crisp uniform, a politician with security detail. But there was no such passenger. Only students in hoodies, mothers soothing children, salesmen clutching coffee cups. Across the aisle, a boy no older than 10 tugged on his father's sleeve. His voice, hushed but urgent, carried farther than he realized. "Dad, why are those fighter planes following us?" The father looked out the window, studied the formation, and his expression shifted. He leaned close to his son, voice weighted with reverence. "That's not a drill. Son, that's a military escort. Someone on this plane matters." The boy's eyes widened. He searched the cabin for the hero he imagined someone decorated, someone obvious. But when his gaze settled on row 14, all he saw was a woman in civilian clothes, a worn canvas bag resting at her feet. No insignia, no rank, just steady eyes fixed on the horizon. A flight attendant noticed the growing questions and leaned toward a cluster of passengers near the front. Her words were quiet, but carried. She served nearly 3 decades in the Air Force. Those jets aren't here by chance. It's a tradition. They're honoring her. She's going home. The explanation spread, not by announcement, but by whisper seat to seat, row to row. Unlike gossip, it carried the solemnity of folded flags handed to grieving families. The atmosphere shifted. Postures straightened. The once invisible canvas bag now felt like it held the weight of a lifetime. They couldn't know the details: blackout flights over desert ranges, briefing rooms where failure wasn't an option, nights where decisions saved lives but left scars unseen. They couldn't know the code names or the coordinates, but they could see the fighters. They could hear the engines outside, keeping pace, and that was enough. Those pilots weren't there by accident, and not solely by orders. They were there because respect demanded it, a salute written in contrails, offered not to a uniform, but to a life lived in service, quietly, without expectation of applause. The boy stared again at Lex, his voice a whisper that carried further than he intended. What did she do to deserve this? And no one around him had an answer. The Boeing 737 began its descent through scattered clouds, engines changing pitch as the captain adjusted course toward anchorage. Passengers felt the familiar tug of altitude loss, but nothing felt routine. Not with 3 F-16s still locked tight outside their windows, black silhouettes etched against the golden sky. At 10,000 feet, the lead fighter tipped a wing, then all 3 moved as one, performing a synchronized salute, crisp wing rocks, deliberate, unmistakable. Every window seat caught the gesture, a final honor spoken in the language of aviators. Then, with flawless precision, they broke formation. One banked left into the burning horizon, contrail stretching across the Pacific. Another rolled right, disappearing toward the jagged Alaskan peaks. The third climbed straight into cloud, vanishing like a spear of light. Their contrails lingered, signatures written in vapor inside the cabin. Silence fell heavy. Passengers pressed to glass, eyes wide. A few clapped softly, others bowed their heads. Phones lowered, forgotten. A businessman swallowed hard, realizing this moment would stay with him forever. A student closed his camera, suddenly ashamed that recording felt like intrusion. For the first time in hours, no one looked bored or tired or lost in their own lives. They knew Instinctively, they had witnessed a tradition older than politics, older than war. The jet touched down with a familiar screech of tires on concrete, but the ritual chaos of arrival never came. No one lunged for the overhead bins, no one rushed the aisle. Instead, passengers stayed seated. Silence thick with unspoken agreement, respect demanded patience. Row by row. Eyes turned toward the middle seat. Colonel Alexandra Lex Moreno rose with deliberate calm, every movement carrying the weight of discipline honed over decades. She reached down, lifted her weathered bag, and set it on her lap. The frayed straps, the faded squadron patch stitched along the side, these details meant more now than medals could. She did not bow. She did not wave. She simply stood, slipped the bag over her shoulder, and stepped into the aisle. And then something extraordinary happened. Without a word, passengers along both sides stood and pressed back, forming a narrow corridor, mothers, students, businessmen, strangers, ordinary people standing shoulder to shoulder, a silent honor guard. No announcements, no cameras, only reverence. As Lex walked forward, every step echoed louder than applause. Every nod replaced the words they couldn't find. And as she moved toward the front of the cabin, one question lingered heavier than all the whispers before it. There was no announcement, no spotlight, no ceremony, just the quiet weight of respect, wordless, undeniable. Passengers watched as Colonel Alexandra Lex Moreno walked toward the front of the cabin, their faces carrying the kind of reverence usually reserved for folded flags and memorial walls. Outside on the tarmac, ground crews had already paused in their routines. Word traveled fast through headsets and radios. By the time the jet rolled to its gate, the story was already alive. 3 F-16s had escorted someone home. It would echo in conversations long after about the woman who wasn't just a passenger, the veteran whose quiet service had earned a tribute written in contrails. Proof that heroism sometimes boarded flights without uniform, carrying only a frayed canvas bag. Through the terminal, Lex moved steadily, carrying more than belongings. She carried the weight of missions finished, duty fulfilled, and an honor she hadn't asked for, but that resonated beyond the moment. The concourse bustled with the ordinary noise of evening travel, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, food wrappers crinkling, but whispers followed her steps. A nod from a gate agent, a glance from a pilot, murmurs passed between crews. The military had its ceremonies, but it also had its quiet codes of respect. Tonight, they had written one more, at a small newsstand. She bought a bottle of water. The clerk, a young veteran himself, caught something in her bearing the posture, the eyes that never stopped scanning, the quiet strength. He didn't ask questions. He only nodded once and said, "Have a good evening." Some recognition didn't need words. Outside baggage claim. A plain sedan waited. Her sister stepped out, the woman who had kept the family house alive through decades of deployments. Their embrace was long, silent, and heavy with relief. Missions complete, promises kept. As they drove through Anchorage neighborhoods softened by evening snow, Lex gazed out at streets she hadn't seen in years. The escort hadn't been ordered or planned. It had risen from the invisible network of respect inside the military pilots who had heard of her retirement and decided that some service deserved recognition. Even without medals or parades, the house looked almost unchanged, maintained with patience and love through all her absences. Inside, a folded American flag rested on the mantel beside photographs that told only fragments of a career lived in shadow. The canvas bag joined them now, its contents patches, logbooks, worn notes placed beside the flag, not trophies, not decorations, but proof that the work had mattered. Later that night, she sat on the back porch, the Alaskan sky clear, stars sharp against the dark. Somewhere, 3 pilots were finishing their debriefs, filing routine reports that would never capture the truth of what they had given her. They had offered a gift no protocol could measure. They had brought her home, and everyone on that flight would remember the hush in the cabin, the silent corridor of strangers, the wing rocks carved in sunset. A reminder that honor can appear when least expected, that service is seen even when invisible, and that some gestures carry weight long after the moment has passed. Colonel Alexandra Lex Moreno was finally home, her service complete, her duty fulfilled, with quiet excellence that needed no speeches, no medals, only the respect of those who understood what sacrifice truly meant.